Welcome to the Art of the Game podcast. We're back for season 2. I'm Ryan, and here for the ride are my co-hosts and co-founders, Reese and Cass. We started this podcast off the back of our business, Sport Design Australia, with the purpose of exploring the intersection of the sporting and creative industries. We wanted to bring you the biggest names in sports design and content excellence. Our guests this season are providing us with perspectives from all across the world, giving us insight into the artistry behind content and how it influences every aspect of the game. Whether you're a sports enthusiast, a designer or creator, Art of the Game will have something for you. So today's episode, I'm very excited to introduce you to Isaac John, or Ice. Isaac John played professional rugby league for 7 years in Australia, New Zealand and the UK. But I think his pride and passion has come from founding the lifestyle and clothing brand YKTR. We've got him on the podcast today. He's been at the forefront of creativity, design and content since founding YKTR about 8 years ago. His experience and interest in the world of sport and fashion and business will no doubt lead to everyone taking something away from this chat. The one unfortunate piece of information which we're just chatting about is Isaac does go for the Roosters, which is a bit of a shame, but we'll let that slide for today. But before we go any further, I'd like to welcome to the Art of the Game podcast, Isaac John. Isaac, welcome, mate.
Great, thanks for having me. Pumped to be on.
Mate, it's great to have you here. I obviously gave you a bit of an intro, but it'd be great to hear from yourself a bit of a journey about going from being a professional rugby league player into now owning YKTR, and I guess what that's meant for you, and what the last kind of 10 or so years have looked like.
Yeah, it's crazy when when I think about, like, I played my whole life playing football and was in a professional environment for like 7 years, and now I've been in the entrepreneurship space for 7 years. So it's kind of like, when you sum it up like that in the intro, it's kind of cool to look back on it. Both journeys haven't been easy. Obviously, when I was in football, I probably was never fully in love with football. I think that I fell into the idea of, like, this is the dream, and I felt like I stayed there for a little bit too long. I always had a passion for, actually I didn't always have a passion. I had a parent, my mum, who really shoved education down my throat and sort of balanced me out with sports. So my dad was always my coach. My mum was always big on education. So they knew I loved sports, so I had to do well in school for me to play sports. And naturally at school, I just enjoyed learning, and it kind of come a little bit easy to me. So I was just doing enough to get by. Moved into professional sports, NRL, and played maybe 7 years. Had a lot of injuries during that time, and during those injured periods, I read a lot of books. And was just into a lot of diverse things. Like, it's quite common now where people are into photography and videography and stuff like that. But when I was doing it, I was kind of like laughed at, and it was like reading and taking photos and making vlogs kind of weren't cool at the time. They are now. But it transitioned me into like a clothing brand called YKTR. So same thing, like, that hasn't been the perfect journey either. It's the ups and downs of business and entrepreneurship, and we've documented a lot of it. So good, bad, ugly, you probably see most of it. Yeah,
it's definitely one of the things that I think like lured me into following you. I think I've been following you for probably about 5 or so years. It was definitely pre-COVID. And one of the things that I found most engaging was your ability to just kind of pull down the walls and show everything, whether it was good, whether it was bad, whether it was in between, and not just kind of show the polished stuff, not show the things that like most people show on their socials. You got into all of it, which still so many people kind of, or even brands, fail to do so. They're only kind of showing those moments that are the peaks or those big successes. So it's definitely something that I've kind of taken and was something that lured me in to follow you all those years back.
I think it's just like, it's an easier way to live life. Like, it is harder to front a camera and say, like, I fucked up here, or like, it is hard. And then when you post it and you know you're going to get judged from a lot of different avenues. But I think over time, like, it feels like a lot lighter. Like, I feel like if everyone sort of knows your flaws, I think first and foremost, if you know your flaws yourself and you sort of show the world that, it kind of makes you like a little bit more relatable. And we went through different phases where we were like the super hot brand. We had the big sports media company rolling at the same time, but it was like very confusing time at the same, like, even though from the outside looking in, it looked fun and be a part of, but behind the scenes, it was like shit, like a lot of days where like I wouldn't sleep, and we had a lot of staff issues and mental health issues and divorce issues. It wasn't a fun time to go through, but I was sort of glad I went through that sort of phase to come out the other side. And then you just like the business of football, the business of journey, or the journey of football, the journey of business is like, it's very similar. It's very much up and down, up and down. Like when you're on, there's times you can touch the ball and everything works out. There's times in business where I always say that's like it's water. Entrepreneurship's like being in the water. Like some days you're floating on top of it, getting the sun. Other days it feels like you're underneath and you're drowning. And I think entrepreneurship's about just loving the water enough to jump back in the next day.
I love that.
So that's how I kind of see it.
That's great. I love that. We'll definitely use that as a little snippet. I love it. We'll start a little bit broad. Like you work in such a space that is driven by creativity, right? You've got a clothing line and you're always got to kind of like innovate and create new styles and work on new styles. And you know, one of the things I love is like each one of your drops all has like a different flavor or a different flair. Where do you find your inspiration for creativity?
Oh, it's kind of from like running. Like in the morning, if I'm detached from technology, I've kind of come off ideas there. But to be fair, it's actually a really bad way to run a business as a clothing business. Yeah. If you look at a lot of the great businesses, they have a really basic core model that people come in and buy. Like to come up with creative ideas all the time starts to become very, very hard. And especially if you're dropping fortnightly or monthly, you're just constantly coming up with stuff. And if you miss that time, if you miss that theme and it's not cool or the color's wrong, you get caught on stock. So it fucks up your cash flow or your inventory. So coming up with ideas, I feel like that's something that comes quite easily to me. But I just don't think it's the best way to also run a business, just purely going through experiences. And you got to understand that like every clothing brand has its cycle of when it's hot, and then over time it gets like cold. And I look at brands like Subi back in the day, who in my opinion were so cool, and they go through different mini cycles, and a lot of brands change or pivot or move. I think those are the smart brands that are able to go, shit, this isn't working, let's pivot, let's try something else. And I think that's something that we've kind of been good at, not great at, but I think being open and vulnerable, we're able to sit there and go, shit, this isn't working. We'll put a hand up, we made a mistake, we're going to try to go this way. Yeah.
Are there any moments that during your journey that you've had like a particular pivot that you've had to make that you look back on and go, yeah, that was a great pivot?
Oh, plenty of bad ones, to be honest. I think the first pivot of trying to dive into entrepreneurship was the cool one for me. It was something that I get up every day excited about trying or solving the problem. But I remember going through that phase where I didn't know if it was going to work, and getting my first paycheck from YKTR. That day felt like I'd won the lotto. I remember driving home and just going, like, our business had made a certain amount of money, and I started getting a small pay from it. It wasn't much. It was about maybe $350, $400 a week. And the year before, year before I was making like six figures through sports, but didn't love it. So it was cool to have your idea validated through community and sales, and then turning that into a pay wage, which was like pretty cool feeling. So that initial pivot was cool. Since that, I think I've pivoted in probably more so all the wrong directions, but they were just sort of lessons that I had to learn or go through. And I had mentors telling me, don't do it. Like I look at YKTR Sports, for example, where my podcast when I first started like took off and went really great, and I always thought that like, oh, I can take everyone with me, you know what I mean? That was kind of always been my biggest downfall. I think I'm loyal to a T, and then sometimes in business I'm a little bit too loyal, where even when projects aren't working, I'll fund it myself because I believe in it long term, or I believe in that person long term. And sometimes I've been burnt from that too. So you know, your mum can tell you to not climb a tree. Sometimes you just got to climb and fall at yourself. So I'm probably, like a lot of entrepreneurs have made plenty of mistakes. I've probably made the most of them. Made the most.
Is there any particular mistake that you are glad you made?
All of them. Yeah. I didn't appreciate them at the time, and I'm glad. I think when you get to that other side and fully accept the circumstance that you're in, and then probably getting to a point where you got full accountability of like, that happened for a reason, and that reason is your fault, because when you're a business owner or entrepreneur, from the people that you hire to every decision that you make to where dollars go, that's on you. And sometimes it's easier to blame people, but like you can blame people straight away, but what that actually does is delay the healing process of you moving on and accepting that. So once you all go, fuck, that was actually on me, and I accept it for what it is, you sort of find like the universe gives you that new path that you can sort of go down.
Such a progressive way to move around.
And it's easy to sit here in hindsight and talk about that, but when you're in those scenarios and it feels like the world's on top of you, or like that analogy I said before, and it feels like you're underwater and you're drowning, they're like sort of tough times to go through. And I used to push entrepreneurship on everyone, but when you go through those sorts of phases, you're like, I'd rather just work a normal job. Yeah. There's phases like that. So there's ups and downs of everything.
And tell us what's a typical day look like for you?
It sort of changes because I cover like a lot of different areas and roles, and probably going into a few more, but we kind of time block our week. Yep. So Mondays, which is today for us, is like we've got a big design day. So we'll go through designs that are working, stuff that we can change, and we push it out to an outsourced designer. Mm-hmm. So we just purely spend our time on that. Yep. And obviously when you're in the analytical mind and the creative mind, they can't coexist. Yeah. So when you're I used to try and go hour here, but we sort of blocked that out. Tuesdays for us are about content and filming, even creating a social presence in many different ways. And like, as you know, Instagram and TikTok and everything seems to change on a dime. Things that used to work for us back in the day don't work for us anymore. Yep. Our customer base has probably grown up with us too. We would have had the young sort of 20 to 25 year olds early on. Those guys become dads and their disposable income starts going on buying houses and family. Yeah. So like, how do you pivot from there? And then Wednesday is a day where I kind of just work on, I have the office to myself, or we work from home, we split up. And I just sort of work on projects that I'm excited about. I'm launching some subscription-based models pretty soon that align with my passions. Yep. And then do some consulting on there. Thursday, we kind of launch, close, and then Friday kind of ties everything up. So,
you've got a good structure.
It's taken time to get there, and it still isn't perfect now. Don't get me wrong, but I just think of the way that the world's moving. Like even having the big shiny office and stuff is probably not needed anymore. Yeah. I see a lot of people doing them 3 from home, 2 in the office, especially the bigger corporations. I think that's the type of model that we want to be heading towards. So it's, I don't know, it constantly changes and things can happen on a dime, but that's kind of how it is right now. Yeah,
we're a bit the same. Like me and my 2 co-founders, we all work from home every day. And we've got one day a month that we do as like a review and a reset, plan the month forward. But aside from that, we're at home every day. And you miss like a few of those social bits, but the ability to sit and concentrate and time block and be able to be efficient in that time, plus then be able to not have to travel, so you get to spend more time with your family, your wife or your kids. It completely changed the game.
Oh, for sure. Like I think about it now. Like I live in Bondi. I live in a great spot. Yeah. I've even got a little garage downstairs that's got a gym in it, but I could turn that into a tiny little office at the same time. And I'm spending 40 minutes driving into Alexandria every single day. Yeah. And then like I'll sit in my office for 8 hours, where I don't necessarily always, but like in my mind, I'm like, I've got all this space and might as well utilize it. But like I see a lot of bigger brands, even in this clothing space, that like for a while there, we had like 8 to 10 staff, and they were covering sports media and YKTR. And like we can run that with like 2-3 people now, and it's like so much easier. So I think the world's heading that way, and I think if you don't move with the world, you kind of get left behind in many different ways. So clothing's one space to be in it. Like a bigger office doesn't make you any more money. More staff doesn't make you any more money. It actually gives you more expenses and more headaches. Yeah,
very interesting. And I think one of the things, Reese and I, we have probably been following you for about the same amount of time, and we have loved your journey. And I think last year, for the first time, you did like a fan created design. So you went out to your community and got people to kind of be a little bit more creative themselves and connect YKTR and their creativity to create a brand.
We're actually doing it now too.
So I was going to say, I saw you've recently just gone again with that. Firstly, like, why is that so important and powerful within your community? And then secondly, how do you see that becoming more of a permanent thing for YKTR?
It's just interesting to see your brand through other people's eyes. Yep. I think a lot of times where, like, I've done like 90% of the designs of YKTR throughout the 8 years, I think you get caught in like a rhythm of how you design, and the other part is you actually get caught up on data because you're like, that sold 2 years ago, so sometimes you try and bring that design back, but time's moved on. But it was just cool to see your brand through other people's eyes, and you get like a different look at them. what actually happened from that, one of the guys, he didn't even win it, but he was a tradie at the time. His name's Dan, and he actually is like full-time like design now.
Oh, wow.
Like, yeah, he left. He does work through us. So I've introduced him to a few other brands that I'm friends with, and super creative. Like when you like meet him, he looks like your typical tradie in his mid-30s, but from a design concept, he's like super smart. So
that's unreal.
Yeah. So it's cool to like that little avenue was a pathway for someone to have a small change in their life, which has been cool.
That's unreal. And is it something that you think that you'll continue doing, or?
Yeah, like I said before, like I got to pivot and change, and I'd love to do it like all the time. But then sometimes like we're looking at a part of our brand now of like how do we restructure and rebrand to a certain area, because I feel like we're a little bit broad. Like when you look at us, people who understand the journey get it. But if you're looking at YKTR for the first time and you go like, what does that brand stand for? A lot of people wouldn't get it. Like if they followed our journey and potentially follow me, they're like, oh, that's Ice and he's done this and he's built it up and all that sort of stuff. But from the outsider looking in, they're just like, it's a little bit confusing.
Okay, interesting. It'll be interesting to follow that journey.
Well, it's interesting. Like if you look at someone like Nike and their taglines like "Just do it," like, and they exercise and you know what I mean. It's about participation. And I think that's what we'll sort of lack, because we weren't lucky because we were one of the first people to start the content and the clothing and stuff like that. So we're early adopters, so we got the rise of that. Yep. But when you get to a point where you're making a certain amount of million within your brand, you start going up against actual brands that do this full time, and they've got a clear message and they've got a clear brand voice, and a lot of them have massive teams behind them, where I was just kind of trying to do it on my own. And that was probably the biggest lesson I've learned over the past 7-8 years is I used to try and do everything on my own. Like I start my podcast on my own, I used to edit on my own. Sometimes it's better just attach, like it's easy to swim with the stream than swim against it. And that's what I'm learning now. Like I think the beauty comes in the collaboration of minds, of ideas, of sometimes collaborations is in opposite strengths in terms of like if you're creative, you need someone who's operational, or if you're creative, you need someone who's analytical and loves like finances. And like one of my mentors is my accountant, and he doesn't see creative, but he sees numbers and he removes emotion from everything. So I think you need a combination of all those things.
And how do you, like, speaking of mentors and people that you either listen to or lean into, like, how have you gone about finding those people, or have they found you?
I think more so they found me, and I've put out so much content over the years, and sometimes when I sit on podcasts with people that are smarter than me, I just kind of form that relationship with them, and I'm lucky to have a couple older guys or girls that sort of like, you know, sometimes they might see a little bit of me in themselves, and they want to help out. And I'm like that with some people too. There's certain people that I really like, and they've got something about them. If they reach out to me, I'll happily give them any advice. But I've been lucky that I've never had to like pay for mentors along those ways, and a lot of them have given me like stern advice that I've ignored, but a lot of the times they've been right over time. You know what I mean? And that's why they're mentors, and that's why their experience in business, because they could see me making mistakes, try to warn me, but I was just like, let me just do my thing and learn on my own.
We've got we've got a lot of young creatives and people who work in social and across content that like follow us. Is there any particular advice that you would give someone in terms of like finding people to listen to, finding mentors? How important are those relationships in any part of their career growth?
I think the creatives I think about that do really well that we work with, they're intuitive, they're not caught up on their own ideas. Now a lot of times when they collaborate with the business, they may have better ideas. So what we actually do is like we'll have a brief of it, and then I openly get asked for feedback. I'm like, be honest, like what would you change about this, or what would you think that this is cool? Like I might think a transition looks cool, but that was cool maybe 5-6 years ago. You know what I mean? Like they come in, the zoom in, zoom out, and you're in different spaces. So in terms of, I can only speak from a business owner to a creative. I think it's okay to speak up, but speaking up in the right way and speaking up early. And one thing that we have focused on recently is more so doing video than like photos. So we used to do, say we've done a 2-hour photo shoot, the photographer might get an hour and a half of that, and our videographer would only get like the scraps and leftovers and stuff. So we started to like flip that around. But also not getting caught up on Like, I think creators, like, because they've taken the time to learn how to edit on Adobe and Final Cut Pro, when something as easy as CapCut comes along, I think that really hurts their feelings, because they are creatives, you know what I mean? They've put their time, effort, energy, ideas, and formulated into whatever their artwork is. But then something like CapCut comes along and their views might triple on CapCut, and it took 10 seconds to make or 20 seconds to make. I think it's best to lean in towards that, because that's where the market's going. And the next part is when obviously AI comes along, and ChatGPT's just released its, I forgot what it's called, but like now they've got the skill set that they understand aperture, they understand depth of field, they understand camera angles, learning text to prompt, and like not resisting AI, but leaning in towards it. I think if they can storytell from an elite level, I think when that AI comes, it's almost like that early adoption phase, where if they can figure it out early and it takes off, they're the ones that are going to make the money, and it takes less work. Yeah,
I was going to ask you your thoughts on how AI is going to play a role, both from a creative standpoint, but also from a clothing brand perspective. I think you shared a video around an AI tool driving the manufacturing process.
That's cool, yeah. I think it's just going to speed everything up, and a lot of people are going, I'm going to get replaced by AI. I just think it's going to make you more efficient in what your job is, because at the end of the day, people still want to connect with people, where like if we done this via Zoom, it wouldn't have the same effect, you know what I mean? So I think that people-to-people thing's always going to be important, but say if you're paying someone $80,000 to do a job, with AI your output might be 4 times as much of results that come out, but it won't be like any more effort, it'll be less effort, but what you're expected to do during that time would be like perceived to be a lot more.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting space, I think. Like, I know it feels like AI is the talk of the town right now, but in reality, AI has been powering things for 5-10 years in the background. It just hasn't kind of had this brand moment that it's had at the moment. So it's going to be interesting to follow and see how different industries, how the creative side of things evolves over time. We're already seeing a lot of US creators who are implementing templates that just run automatically. So instead of creating 100 different graphics, you just have to create one, and then you're importing all the inputs, and it's spitting out the designs for you. So what used to take a day or 2 days of work is now taking one design work, and then the rest is happening in seconds.
And that's exciting. And that's like I said before, creatives have this like my ideas, and they kind of get fixed on that fixed mindset. But if you open your eyes to like everything else that's happening, and you're an actual creative and you're a great storyteller, all the stuff should excite you. Like I sit in meetings sometimes, and I feel like I can break things down in a pretty simple way for people to understand. And I've been talking to New Zealand, like the All Blacks and Super Rugby and guys like that. And like when you break things down in a certain way, it's like a certain skill set. So storytelling is always going to be important, and it always has been. And the way we storytold back in the day was through reading books, through telling books, through writing books. Then obviously like Hollywood comes along, and Hollywood's a form of storytelling, and then the internet comes along, and documentation and vlogging becomes a part of storytelling. Now AI comes along, it's just going to be the same game. It's just a different platform. Yeah,
so true, very true. Let's talk about creativity in sport. There's a lot of, let's say, creative fans that have made success out of their passion for sport and a creative view on content. And like I'm talking like Bloke, Hello Sport, Rugby League Guru, Roasty, YKTR Sports was there for a while. Like what do you think these creators need to be thinking about to kind of set themselves apart creatively?
If you think about the space that they're in right now, it's kind of a saturated market in podcasting. And obviously the guys like Denon, who took off first, like I talk about early adoption quite a bit in this podcast. Like he was the guy that got all the upside, and then we were probably second. Like I was second into that space where I was interviewing. And then obviously we have YKTR Sports. Those boys are known as Levels now. But now they've had great success. So sort of moving into new spaces, I think if you're coming into the podcast space, like if you really think about it, if you go radio, they're the guys who are 50 to 60 years old. You look at television, they're 40 to 50 years old, and all the guys who are on Fox Sports are in that sort of category. 30 to 40, that's like the phase that we're in. Us, Denon, Scope, all the Hello Sports boys are in that 30-year-old. That's the new media that is kind of becoming saturated, and the next part is what's next. And it's probably streaming. It's probably building individual personal brands through streaming. So that's where I see it heading.
Yeah.
Or really short form content or series that are based in vertical video.
Yeah, I think that
space.
That short form space is just blowing up, and those early adopters, the people that have been on the Vines, TikTok when it was ByteDance, and that really kind of understand that audience and their consumption behaviors, they're the ones that are gonna be the ones that we're all going to be learning off in 5-10 years time.
I've been looking at content through a few different people that we work with, and we're like, the less produced it is actually, because we're so used to seeing produced content now, and everyone knows how to B-roll and stuff like that. The stuff that really stands out is the least produced stuff. And Sam Sulik on YouTube? Yeah. So he's probably like the best example of that, where his editing is like camera there, lav mic, and he just goes through his day. Now over time people fall in love with him because he's rocking up consistently, and content becomes like a relationship between producer and listener. And one of the most important parts about relationships is like showing up daily, and whenever you feel good or bad, and that's where people form that connection. So I think we're going away from the Alex Hormozi style pop with Mr. Beast. Like the big production, everything changes within 2-3 seconds to keep your attention. I think people just want that sort of longer form or less produced style content.
Like single take style content.
Single takes, yeah. So I forgot what it's called. There's a name for it. Do you know?
No, I don't know the particular name for it, but there's a few people that I've seen that are starting to create more content in that way.
Girls do it smart, where like they put on makeup and they're telling the story. So it's kind of like you're there with them, but it's not just sitting in front of a camera, like pop. I start to feel like that is getting like back to like 70s sales content. Like it's just like in your face, shouting messages. It's like really quick cuts. It kind of feels that content was getting to that point, but now we're starting to see it kind of mellow back out a little bit. A bit more raw. Yeah, and like I said, like at the end of the day, when everything's becoming AI, people still, like if everything's becoming AI, it always swings back the other way, where people are like, oh, I want to deal with people again. So even though you're watching it on social media or technology, there still feels like there's a connection there through person, and that's through being like vulnerable and stuff like that too.
Yeah. What about creativity in sport in Australia? What are your views on it? I'm not gonna ask you anything other than what do you think of this current state of creativity in Australian sport?
Probably like more so biased towards Rugby League, but I think it's in a really great spot. When you look at it, like a couple of years ago, they had no money behind them, no assets behind them. Now, based off that report, they've got 250 million, and a lot of it stems from having really cool content. I just seen the Broncos video they done for their heritage.
Yeah, it's cool.
I didn't realize one of my friends actually shot it. Like I shared it on my story, and he goes, "Oh, bro, I shot that." I was like, "Oh, that's crazy." So I think the creativity in sport, they're starting to get it. I think media companies within an organisation is almost like one of the great stakeholders within it. So obviously, there's going to be salespeople, and their jobs to get like advertising and sponsorships and stuff like that. But if they don't have the media that's attached to it, it's just hard to sell. And even now, like when we're looking at advertising budgets or trying to get people on as sponsorships, it's hard to get sponsors because the market's so tight. It's tight in alcohol, it's tight in clothing, because there's no confidence in the market to just spend the disposable income. So it's a really tight space to be on, but if you're creative, and especially if you can create it organically, you're still going to create touch points. And I always say that branding's like building a fire in winter. And like there's seasons of summer where everything's easy and you got the Midas touch and fruits falling from the tree and it's easy to grab. But sometimes when you go for winter, sometimes the best thing you do is build a fire, get everyone around it and tell them stories. And I think content can do that. And then when it does come time for the summer to come and people have got money again and ready to buy, they are, who was with me during that time and who was storytelling during that time. So I think that's a great way to look at it.
Is there anyone who's creating those fires really well?
I think, I'm looking at league again. I think Broncos, it's easy for them. Not easy for them at the moment, but they've got a really great content creator in Tim Cossins and Nathan, who are doing really great jobs. But they're also really cool. Like their whole crew is like young. They're all pretty good looking dudes as well. They play a great style of football. They play at Suncorp. So I think they're doing it really well. There's a guy named Jackson Thomas who used to work for us.
Yep.
He went to the Warriors last year, and before he left, we sort of sat down and sort of mapped out a plan for him for when they're going over there. Same thing, they killed it.
Yeah.
And then obviously when content goes well and people start caring about the player more so as a human, they want to rock up to those games. And then when players start running out of the tunnel and they see 20,000 instead of 5,000, they play a little bit better.
Yeah.
And then the competition that come over, they're excited to be in a full house too. So that game becomes a lot better. They become, and it's just like this compounding effect that I generally feel like it starts with content.
Yeah, and like we work in the content space, and we're talking to clubs, we're talking to leagues all the time, right? And one of our biggest challenges is educating them on why they should actually be putting more investment and doubling down on content creation and the content that they put out on their social channels. If there was one thing that you could, if you had a NRL executive in front of you or a club executive in front of you, what's the one thing that you would say to them about content?
It's hard to measure ROI straight off the bat. So a lot of times when you put money into Facebook ads, you can get that ROAS and see it. So I think it's like when you are making content, look at it from a holistic point of view. And I'll give you the Warriors, for example, like their merch sales went up so much last year because everyone was going to the game because of the content was so good and the boys started winning. Now their merch store started selling out and they actually had to change jersey suppliers because the guy couldn't keep up with the speed of what. And so if you're missing out on say $50,000 worth of jerseys every week, that starts to add up. So a lot of the times when people see content, they might see the numbers of views, but I think holistically when you look at across like crowd attendance, merch sales, even looking at the like comments and touch points that you're actually creating throughout, looking at it from a holistic point of view, not just like this is the $10,000 worth of content that we spent. Where's my money back from that? So I think that's probably a better way to look at it, and that's branding. You know what I mean? That's like, what are we doing on social media that creates a touch point for our fan base that resonate with us, just so we'll not just go, fuck, here's season membership tickets or we're on sale this week. Like it's not so transactional. It's more so like relationship build.
Yeah, it feels like we are at an interesting point. We've got some clubs who get it and they're investing and they're kind of owning their story. They own the narrative, both from a brand perspective, but also through their players as well. But then you've got clubs on the other side who are under-resourcing, and we're in a point in time where there's a bit of an opportunity cost if you're not investing in that content, because if you're not creating it and owning a narrative, someone else is doing it. Your Fox Sports might be, your bloke in a bar might be owning that.
For sure.
That story. What can you say to clubs who are in that space, who aren't investing?
They're just going to get left behind. Like when you don't have full stadiums, when you're starting to ask for like more, like the idea that I had that I posted on my social media a while ago was that I think during the off season is a really important time because like there's no football, so there's no money coming in. But I think if every club had a 6-part series of the off season, and it could follow a similar route, but each day there was a new club dropping. So each club could have 17 days before they had to produce episode 2 and episode 3. Now, if you look at it from a micro standpoint where like each episode could drop down into a piece of TikTok content, a reel, and all you got to do is collab with the NRL. So instead of the NRL thinking like, all right, cool, we've got $3 million to spend on the marketing team and we want to go out, use that money, give it to content producers within the area of Manly, of Penrith, and their job is to produce a 5-minute doco for YouTube that's going to strip out into 2 pieces of micro content. You'd have about 3.5 months worth of content dropping out every single day. And none of it's based around rugby. The actual game of 80 minutes is more so about building up the brands and the stories, and it's about coaches, it's about who's the trainer. Like the club isn't players. There's a lot of stakeholders in there. What about the fans? That's how I see it.
I think it's like such a great idea. The like rugby league fans, whether you're a diehard or whether you're someone who likes to dip in and out, that kind of content is like perfect for that period of time, right? And you start to think about like all the brands that would want to be part of that over time. And you're nearly in a position where that is actually your fruitful period of time. That's where you can bring in sponsors and commercial partners to spend on content that changes the game. Like the 80 minutes is always going to be the 80 minutes, and there's going to be nuances to how the game changes and how the game flows. But the reality is, it's still going to be the same 80 minutes, right? It's how can you elevate that time outside of that 80-minute period?
And it's also about the sales team, like repositioning advertising. Like I don't remember the last time I've gone to a football game and looked at the back corner sign and gone, do you know what? I want to buy that chicken brand. I don't know what it is, but it's like repositioning advertising and marketing spend to drive it towards content.
Yeah.
Like to me, it doesn't make sense having a sign on the side, and the way they sell it, obviously, like, oh, this is where Nathan Cleary's going to kick, and your brand's going to be at the back of that. Or I knew a guy that paid a bit of money to be where the coach is. He was the sponsor behind it in the media wall, and he goes, "We just spent this on this," and I was just sitting there like, to me, it didn't make sense because I never look at it and go. I don't look at Ivan Cleary and go, "Fuck, what's behind him?"
Yeah,
like,
it's so true. It's so true, and you have to think that there's going to be a shift in how those partnerships and how those dollars are spent over time. But I think we're still a long way off. Right? I think there's a lot of brands that are happy with logo slapping, and there's a lot of clubs and leagues that are happy to take the money for that logo slap.
And a lot of it is like they sell you can come to the season presentation, end of season presentation, or there's a media night for all out sponsors and stuff. So, and they want to create touch points with those players, and like, oh, I have my photo, and number 6 is brought to you by, like, I think they get a kick out of that.
Absolutely, yeah.
And like, if you look at a lot of the successful business owners that would be in that space right now, a lot of them would sit between that, like, 40 to 60 years old bracket. So when they see traditional marketing, they see that as a good use of marketing spend or advertising spend, and it probably isn't anymore.
Yeah, it's the sales team that just tapping into that individual's personal connection to that club.
For sure.
What about like young creators? Are there any young creators, sport or not, in Australia, globally, that you think people should be keeping an eye on?
We had a young guy who used to work for us. His name was Caleb.
Oh, yeah.
And he's really good. Yeah. We hired him when he was like 16, 17. He was just a kid off the street, to be honest. Like, obviously he had a home, but he was just sort of fucking around doing nothing. And he worked for us for a year or two, ended up going on to film for Andrew Tate and travel the world. And he's got a crazy story, and he's had great success, and then he's lost it all. And he's still like 20. So he was pretty cool to watch. But I think in terms of people that I'm watching, I think the best ones at the moment, they're just really consistent in what they do. There's this guy, I'm not too sure where he's from, but I find myself watching his content all the time, where he sits on the couch with his girlfriend and he smokes like weed, and then he goes and cooks something. He's an Australian guy too. Yeah, okay. I find that type of interesting, and it's consistent. You know what you're going to get, and he turns up for you every single day. So right now, in this next little 12 to 18 months, I think it's more so about what we talked about before, personal branding. It's stuff that's not over edited. It's probably just basically done on CapCut, got captions attached to it. I think captions, like what you write, and those are really important again. I see a lot of people doing that little loop trick where they're like, see down below and it's only running for like 4 or 5 seconds. So the algorithm picks it up and go, oh, this must be more valuable. There's all those little hacks, but I think in this next little phase, I think it's just purely going to be about personal branding. Like a lot of the biggest brands in the world, Elon Musk, like Jeff Bezos, like a lot of the biggest companies, you know who their founder is, ChatGPT, like Sam Altman. Any brand, Jerry Lorenzo, like Ronnie Flagg, who runs a brand called Kith. Like, I think being attached to a founder is a really important part. And I think, even though I run a brand, I don't even think it's the best way to build businesses, because there's a lot of touch points there where you have to come up with design, sampling, manufacturing, taxes, get it shipping all over, marketing costs. Like, you know, AI wasn't really around when we first started. So I think there's a lot easier ways to build businesses moving forward. Yeah,
interesting you mentioned about the brand, and it's a good segue into like talking a little bit more about athletes. Because I think we can all kind of agree that athletes are becoming more and more an important connection for a brand into an audience. And in the US, you know, athletes are probably understanding the power of their brand a little bit more, and they're investing in that. You've spoken a fair bit around, particularly around rugby league players and them doing a lot of brand activity for other brands, but not investing in their own brand. What, like for you, what kind of got you into this space where you went, you know, I want to create YKTR, I want to invest in my own brand, I want to create content? Like, what was the point in time in which that happened?
I kind of hated being told what to do. And I've never been like disobedient or been in trouble in any type of way. I've always been a good student, good son. Even when I was a player, I felt like I was very like coachable.
Yep.
But I kind of felt like I was always trapped within that football environment. So I went through a phase where I just wanted to do everything on my own. I wanted to create media companies on my own. I had this idea that I wanted to take on Fox Sports, and obviously when you look back in hindsight, like you just can't compete with millions and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
And even when the boys left YKTR Sports to start Levels, it's like you're potentially going up against Tab. Like they're $1 billion company,
Yeah.
and I was just funding stuff out of my own pocket. So you just got to realize sometimes you got to flow. Sorry, what was the original question?
Well, I was just curious as to like what the point in time was where you were like
Okay.
a rugby league player, but then you were like, you know what, I actually want to create this brand and build this brand and create content around it.
Yeah, but to be honest, like we weren't like, I've never been like that massive into clothes, and I know we're a clothing brand, but I always wanted to use YKTR as a vehicle.
Yep.
And a vehicle to do what I wanted to do. And I think my best attribute comes from like creating brand stories and telling content, and it's not always making the content,
Yep.
but it's like setting that direction. And we just kind of use YKTR to do that. So that was kind of like how I saw it. And obviously when you've been told what to do, what to eat, if you kick to that corner, if we complete at 90% for the game, we're going to win.
Yep.
Once you go to the airport, you have to wear a grey polo on the way back. Like for me, who kind of likes to think of himself as someone who's quite smart, I just felt like that was restricting for me in that environment. So I just kind of wanted to do like my own things, and I actually thought I wanted to have like no routine whatsoever until I realized I got outside of football, and I'm like, fuck, I actually need routine. Like we've all had routine since we were babies to I was 27 when I left football, and it took me a while to figure that out, that routine was actually something that got me on my way.
Yeah. Interesting. And you've spoken, you know, I think there was some footage of you chatting to the Panthers boys in pre-season around like harnessing their brands whilst they're players, so that post their football career that they've actually got something to stand on, and then they build an audience and an affiliation. They might have created products. Like, can you give us a little bit more of an insight into that, and how important it is for you to kind of share that message with athletes?
I think it's important because like one of the things that I see a lot is like a lot of players leave and their whole self-worth goes with it. Like for me, when I played, like rugby was just what I did. It didn't define who I was.
Yep.
I was into, like I said, reading and taking photos, and I felt like I was so diverse by the time I left. When I left, it was like a chunk of me had left, not like the whole thing. And you just hear stories of guys like trying to commit suicide and like partners leaving them and losing their families and houses, and girls starting to extort the boys for money. Like you hear all these crazy things, but my goal for that conversation, and probably is something that I've realized I was passionate about after leaving that chat, was like I just want to create more diverse players.
Yep.
That and I think naturally they're already heading that way. They're a lot more open with how they talk about emotions, creativity. They've seen a lot of great examples with business where, like within sports, it's very copy and paste. In rugby league's copy and paste. They all dress the same, they all play the same. When something's working, they always seem to follow that. But my whole point of that conversation was just to diversify them as men and create, just ask different questions. You know what I mean? Like a lot of the times when you're in football environment, you talk about the same thing. So even encouraging them to spend, instead of doing a business degree, go see who's the 10 biggest businesses within their organisation and go take the founder for lunch.
Yeah.
The guys who sponsor that club would love to hang around Nathan Cleary for a schnitzel and a round of golf.
Yeah.
And you can actually pick their brains. So I generally think, and this is just personal opinion, and I never went for university, but I reckon if you hung around 10 of the founders of every like sponsorship that's at the club, you'll learn a lot more about business than sitting in the classroom for 3 years and getting a university degree.
Yeah, definitely. And what, like, when you chat to players about this, like, what's their reaction? What's their general?
It was cool. Like it was, because I've sat in those seats, and I had a tough time slot where I was between field and weights, and I had about 35, 40 minutes where I had to talk. So a lot of the times football players' attention spans aren't that long anyway.
Yeah, they're gone.
They're gone. And I got the between training sessions as well.
Yeah.
So they couldn't have thrown me a harder bone. But I got about 8 to 10 of the boys message me straight after and saying that was cool, and if we could catch up later. So, and it's a squad of 30, you got like a 30%.
percentage.
Yeah. Good percentage of people that replied. So it was cool. I think with football players, you just got to talk, and anyone, you just got to talk in terms that they understand.
Yeah.
And I never used to do that. I was like, I wanted you to know how smart I was through vocabulary.
Right. Okay.
So yeah, and it's a gronky way to live. And I was like, you just go through those phases.
Yeah.
Where I used to say all these big words, and I knew what they meant, but I used to try and flex IQ on people, which is a sign of insecurity, isn't it?
Yeah, it's interesting. Do you know when you picked up on that you were doing that?
Oh, when their eyes just... when you're talking to someone, trying to explain something, and they just go that way, you've lost them.
Yeah.
So I think, you look at a lot of the smartest people in the world, you look at the Stoics or anyone that I like listening to, they're able to explain things in the most basic form. And there's that saying, if you can't explain it to an 8-year-old, you don't really know what you're talking about. Yeah. And there's a guy, do you know Naval Ravikant?
Oh, I know that name, yeah.
Oh, yeah. He's like a angel investor.
Yeah.
I remember listening to a podcast maybe about 4 years ago on Joe Rogan Experience, and I was probably still going through that phase where I was trying to figure out who I was as a person, entrepreneur, like to have my ideas. Like when I was on podcasts, I wanted all my ideas to be out there.
Yeah.
And I was just listening to him speak, and he spoke so basic that I found myself always listening to it. And he writes lots of tweets, and they're like one-liners, and I kind of copied that flow from him, because I write a lot of like one-liners, and they're kind of meant to be thought-provoking, not always true, but I like to speak in shorter terms because you can just get more attention that way.
Yeah, well, it's probably a good pivot. I wanted to talk to you quickly just about the content that you create around your own personal brand. You do a lot of like Ask Me a Question on Instagram. How have you found your own content evolve over time?
I've probably should have just stuck to what worked. Like I said, when I first started podcasting, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I was getting like 100,000 views in my first month, which was like, I didn't realize at the time, but that was like great numbers. And I felt like when I went away from that is when I was trying to bring everyone on. I was trying to create like different podcasts and different sports podcasts, and probably took away from my strength, which is like speaking and talking and asking questions and being vulnerable and documenting. So I think what's evolved over time is just like how you present it, and it's still like me breaking down things. And I'm probably at a point now where like my personal brand makes me more money than me running a business, and the business takes up a lot more time. But I think how my content's evolved is like it's gotten simpler. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to put it.
Yeah, and how would you share your learnings with other athletes or even ex-athletes who maybe aren't investing their time or their energy into creating content? What would you say to them?
I'm actually building out a course for that, like with basic frameworks attached to it, which is, and it's funny what you guys do is like, it was kind of like the idea that I had of connecting athletes and businesses and content creators kind of in this one sort of hub. It was like, when you sort of explained it a little bit earlier, I was like, oh shit, that sounds familiar. Yeah. And obviously you guys were here first, but yeah, I just want to just like I said about that guy, Naval Ravikant, who asks questions that are like thought-provoking. And if they're thought-provoking, you start thinking in a different way, then hopefully that leads to action. And obviously with action comes results. Yeah. So I just kind of want to be that guy for the boys that asks a different question and pushes them along a different line. And over time, you might get a message from the boys in 5-10 years saying like, that one conversation changed my life. And a lot of all the things I've done through business, and I've made great money, and individually I've made great money, and I've lost a lot of money at the same time. I think those messages are always the cool ones. And like, I want to get to a point where like you're so successful that like you can give all that stuff away for free. I'm not at that point now, but I do feel like I give a lot of value through content for free. Yeah. So
I feel like some of those messages could be very powerful and get you to a point where you're like, this is exactly why I'm doing this. Like, yes, it's great the money, or yes, it's great the audience that I've got, but the reality is being able to help those people and shifting their mindset and helping them take their next step. Right?
It's the best feeling in the world, and I've had it over the past 7-8 years, and I've had it through people who've contemplated suicide, and you've been listening to my podcast just before they've tried to do something. Wow. When you're a little bit younger, like it feels like it puts a lot of pressure on you. But yeah, I think it's like when I left that Penrith chat, I felt like, oh, this is where I should be. Like I had like goosebumps, had butterflies in my stomach, and obviously got a few more speaking events coming up over the next little period. But yeah, it was cool to sort of, and like a lot of the times I've made podcasts and content, and it's like this, like you're in a room and you press enter, you don't really know how far content goes, or you don't really know who you're going to affect or what that person's upbringing was or were they abused as a kid. Like it's scary how far your content can go. And I come from a town of 10,000 people, so whenever I see like my podcast can go from anywhere at the moment between like 7,000 to like 25,000 in one episode, and I always relate it back to that. I'm like, basically that's like the whole town listening times two. So I feel like it's just staying consistent in the lane, but it's aligned with values of what I actually want to do in life. And I feel like over time, everyone gets to a point where they just want to help someone.
Yeah. What's the thing that is there one thing that gets you up every day?
Oh, I'm mostly excited to get up. Like that was kind of like my little phrase that I've had over the past 4 or 5 years is like how I measure success is like I'm actually excited to get up.
Yeah.
And like I said before in business, it ain't always perfect. Like sometimes you're up before you want to be because you're just lying there stressing and thinking about it. But like I said before, I generally think I can make a change. And I feel like YKTR as a brand made a change on even how players and athletes move, and through our brand everyone that worked for us went on to have like better jobs and get paid twice as much as what they were earning and provide, which has been cool to see. And even running the design competition and even posting out how to start a podcast or how to start a clothing brand. I've had like over 100 brands start moving towards that way. So I'm at a point now where I'm starting to get some really exciting opportunities pop up, but I feel like this just all starts with me like giving and helping and being honest and vulnerable. And in a world where we're moving towards AI, I think the guy who's vulnerable and real is the one that's going to really stick out.
Yeah, that's great advice. And last question for you before you wrap up. What's next? Like, is there anything you can share that you're working on? Is there anything that you're even keen to put focus into? Yeah,
I'm doing a lot at the moment, so there's the things that are going to change within business for us and then me individually. I'm probably at the point where I'm crippled by opportunity, which is a great place to be. It's just trying to pick the right ones that align with me and what I want to do. So normally when I jump on podcasts, I've always just like shot first and aim later. Like I'm like, I want to start a sports media company or I want to start a clothing company. But probably with age, you just become a little bit more calculated. And I think when you project things out too early, like people wanting you to fail, especially in this country. Yeah. So holding cards closer to my chest at the moment. Few things are going to change. It's just the nature of the beast and the world that we live in. And I'm asking for bigger things to the universe. So it's given me different challenges, which is exciting but tough at the same time because you still got to get through those points. But like zoning and helping boys, players. Speaking is going to be a big one, but behind the scenes, a few other things.
Yeah, nice. And if people want to follow your journey, follow YKTR's journey, where can they find you?
We're on Instagram at YKTR_, and my personal one is IICE_. It's kind of my first Instagram name, probably need to outgrow that. But you can find my podcast called The Ice Project too. So do a few different podcasts. Got a couple new ones coming up too. I'm doing one with the mind coach for Nathan Cleary and Sean Johnson. It's going to be a 6-part series. His name's Dan Hasler. He's exclusive to the Penrith Panthers too, so doing content with them. Paul Waddy, who's probably one of the biggest e-com coaches in the country, doing podcasts with him as well. So it's more so about creating relationships with smarter people, interviewing them, and then passing it out. So find me on the Ice Project.
Awesome. Well, mate, I appreciate your time. We've loved having you on Art of the Game podcast. We can't wait to potentially, see what's down the line, see what you're producing and what you're bringing out. Maybe, Sport Design Australia and ICE working together in a collab. That'd be pretty cool.
I'd happily do it.
Mate, awesome. Thank you for coming along and appreciate it.
Cheers,
mate. Thank you.